If you're a global tech company, there's a good chance your view of China's intellectual property landscape is, well, a little dated. Maybe you still see it as a bit of a Wild West, where infringement is just a cost of doing business. But that view isn't just outdated anymore, it's downright dangerous. The entire battlefield has shifted, and in this explainer, we're going to break down the new rules for this very high-stakes game. To really get a sense of just how big this transformation is, get a load of this number. Over 520,000 IP cases are filed in China every single year. This is not some legal backwater. It's one of the most active, most important arenas for technology and innovation on the planet. And if you want to succeed there, you need a totally new strategy. So you might be asking, how did this all happen? Well, it definitely wasn't an overnight thing. The groundwork was being laid for years, starting way back in 2014. But the real turning point, the moment the alarm bells should have gone off, was in 2017. That's when a top-level policy came down with a very clear goal: make IP infringers pay a heavy price. And all of that led to the 2021 patent law, which completely rewrote the rules of engagement for everyone. Okay, so that brings us to the first part of our analysis, the new arsenal. The 2021 law isn't just about tweaking a few rules on paper. It's about giving the courts some serious firepower, tools that come with massive financial consequences. And for global companies, this is where the risk has just multiplied exponentially. You know, at the very heart of this new arsenal is the introduction of what are called punitive damages. And this is a huge philosophical shift. The goal isn't just to compensate the patent holder for what they lost anymore. No, the idea now is to hit infringers with penalties so severe that they act as a massive deterrent. It's not just about paying for what you broke. It's about making sure you never even think about breaking it again. To see how this plays out in the real world, let's look at this case involving vanillin. That's the stuff that gives vanilla its flavor. A market-leading chemical company suddenly sees its global sales and prices just collapse. They know something is wrong, and all signs point to a new competitor that has somehow, almost magically, replicated their super-secret manufacturing process. So they take them to court. At first, a lower court awards a penalty of about 3.5 million yuan. But here's where it gets really interesting. On appeal, the Supreme People's Court basically said, nope, that's not nearly enough. They recalculated everything based on the infringer's profits and handed down a staggering final award of 159 million yuan. That's about 22 million US dollars. This case wasn't some random fluke. It's a crystal clear demonstration of that 2017 policy directive in action. This massive penalty was the deliberate execution of a national strategy to, you guessed it, make infringers pay a heavy price. The message to the entire market couldn't be clearer. The days of cheap IP infringement in China are long gone. So with the stakes this incredibly high, understanding the rules of engagement is absolutely critical, especially when you're talking about collaboration. Before you even think about starting an R&D partnership or commissioning any development in China, you have to know who owns the IP that comes out of it. And believe me, the default rules might really surprise you. The big takeaway here is that if you don't have a specific contract spelling everything out, these default rules kick in. For cooperative work, it's joint ownership, which sounds fair but can lead to total gridlock. But the really critical one, the one that trips up so many foreign companies, is for commissioned work. In that case, the developer, the contractor you hired, is the default patent owner, not you, the client who paid for it. All you get are free usage rights. You can't own it, you can't license it, and you can't sell it. That is a huge strategic pitfall. Let's look at a real scenario. Company A hires Company B to develop a new product. They work together, Company A gives feedback, and they land on a final design. Then, Company B goes and patents that design in its own name. And then, in a wild turn of events, Company B sues Company A for infringement for making the very product it paid to create. Now, thankfully, the court sided with Company A, upholding their right to free implementation. But think of the cost, the time, the sheer headache of that lawsuit. The whole mess was completely preventable with a clear contract from day one. Now, what happens if you do end up in a dispute? You have to stop thinking of it as just a legal process and start thinking of it more like a chess match with a series of strategic moves. You've got to have both offensive and defensive tactics in your playbook. The main offensive move is pretty straightforward, a classic infringement lawsuit. But a really powerful defensive countermove is patent invalidation.
If you get hit with a lawsuit, the very first question you should ask is, wait a minute, is this patent even valid? If you can prove the technology already existed in the public domain, what's known as prior art, you can get the patent thrown out entirely, and the lawsuit just disappears.
Beyond just trying to invalidate the patent, you've got a few other key defenses in your toolkit. There are prior use rights, which can protect you if you are already using the technology internally before your competitor filed a patent. There's patent exhaustion, which basically says once a product is sold legally, the patent holder can't control its resale. And finally, there's the good faith defense, which can seriously reduce the penalty if you can prove you didn't know you were selling an infringing product and can show where you got it from. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground here. The new penalties, the tricky ownership rules, the combat tactics for patent disputes. Let's distill all of this down into a clear, simple, strategic playbook that every tech leader absolutely needs to understand. So, here's your playbook. First, and this is the big one, contracts are king. Never, ever rely on those default ownership rules. Spell everything out. Second, the stakes are real. This isn't a rounding error on a balance sheet anymore. We're talking tens of millions of dollars. Third, your defense has to be proactive. Know your options, like patent invalidation, before you ever get sued. And finally, document everything. I mean everything. Those detailed R&D records are your absolute best friend when you need to prove you created something independently. And this brings us to the final question, the one you should be asking in your next strategy meeting. In this completely transformed IP landscape, yeah, the cost of accidentally infringing is massive. But given how strategically important this market is, the cost of inaction, of being too scared to even engage, could be even greater. The real challenge isn't about avoiding risk anymore. It's about managing it with intelligence and with your eyes wide open.